welcome to the Happy Insights podcast. My name is Happy Ali. I am your host today, and I have a wonderful treat for you. I have one of my favorite people who I've never met before today, but she is one of my favorite people because I can't get enough of her. Her name is Regina Meredith. She's my Oprah. She is a broadcast journalist who is known for making the most challenging topics accessible to everyone. She has worked for NBC, PBS, and is currently the host of Open Minds on Gaia, which is in its 29th season. She co-wrote the book The Future Human: New Ways of Living and Being on Earth with Lee Harris, who's also one of my favorite people and channelers. And I really resonate with Regina and Lee's work, so I'm really excited for this episode. Welcome to the show, Regina.
Thank you so much, Happy. I'm happy to be here, Happy.
I'm really excited. So, as I told you, I'm going to do 6 questions and I'm going to ask you that really quickly and just give me whatever answer comes to your mind. Okay. So, the first question is, what is your mission on this planet?
Literally to do exactly what I'm doing right now and one step further, which is to take it beyond, stop being a coward and you start doing more commentary. I'll still do my interviews, but start doing more commentary because I have a lot to say that I normally don't say.
So, why do you do what you do?
I was literally born to do it. I didn't choose it. I didn't ever want to be on camera. Even starting in television all those years, all those shows, decades of television, it was just a practice for now. It's like I didn't have a choice. I did it on a dare, got pushed into it, and here we are.
I love that. Now, I have heard you say that you speak to your spirit guides. How do you connect with the spiritual world? What does it look like when you speak to your spirit guides?
Well, over the decades, it was a process initially. It's very funny because everybody has a beginning to that part of the journey, and mine was strange and fun. But now, because it's so efficient, I just sit down and set an intention and say, if there's something I wish to know, show me. And I go into a place that is just a dark screen, dark field, and I wait. If there's nothing for me to see, or if they don't want to share that with me at this time, then I'm patient and I'll try again another time. But normally they'll come through and share what's necessary. They don't have a lot of superfluous information. They kind of are nuts and bolts guides.
So, does it show up as a visual or do you hear audio visual? Is it like a movie?
All of the above.
I love that.
So sometimes it just shows the whole thing to me. A scene, if I say, what was the genesis of this thing, where I have no idea, I might be looking at something that's very simple in life, but what they show me is so unexpected, and it'll come out almost like a movie. I feel everything, see everything, I'm experiencing it, I'm hearing it, I'm smelling it. My entire being is involved. I'm taken into another reality. It happens very quickly. So I can't go back and ask a lot of questions. I can't let my mind become involved. I'm literally overwhelmed in the center of almost like being in the center of a movie. And it's just boom, boom, boom. Here it is. Here's the backstory. This is where you came from. And it's over. And it shuts down. It's like, whoa, 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 wait, wait. I have more questions. Too bad. We already gave you what you needed.
I've always wanted to know how you did that. Now, if you could go back in time in history, where would you go?
Oh, well, I'd go back to Atlantis, of course.
I knew you were going to say that because you have a lot of connection with Atlantis. I noticed how
Well, and
much.
also because at the time that I'm speaking of, Atlantis is not very well understood. There were different stages of Atlantis and its destruction. In the earlier stages, where it was concurrent with Lemuria, for example, even ancient Egypt is far more ancient than we understand. A lot of it was concurrent. And that's where a lot of the very high spiritual technology existed that we were using. And it was beautiful. It was clean. I loved it. It was fun. I did healing in a lot of lifetimes. And so I'd probably go back there and see the key elements of how to articulate or bring that forward in this time so that it's useful and understandable.
If I'm not incorrect, or if I'm correct, I believe you've done a lot of regressions where you did end up in
Yes.
Atlantis. So you do have some firsthand
Yes.
knowledge.
Yes. I was taken back into some regressions, including by Dolores Cannon. That's the one people are most intrigued about because she wrote about it in Convoluted Universe. But I've done a lot of them. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Now, if you could describe yourself in one word, what would it be?
Curious.
Oh, me too. That's mine too.
Soul brother.
Yeah. What is one message you like to share with humanity?
My favorite message for humanity is we are an absolutely splendid species. We have so much capacity for love, creativity, kindness, generosity. That's who we really, really are. And we've been taken advantage of. And we just have to know these distortions aren't really who the bulk of humanity are. We're good. We're good. We're good. And we're going to go forward in the future and be more mature and even better. We'll talk about that. But just to say, don't beat yourself up. You're a beautiful being and you're just awakening to all of that exquisite connection with your higher self right now. Most people are just now waking up to it and it's connected to everything. So we have all we need right inside this little package.
That's funny. I just did an interview and my answer was very similar. So,
Not surprised.
soul sisters or brothers, whatever we are.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into the topic of this book about the future human. Can you tell me how it came to be or how it all just came together? Whose idea was it?
Well, okay. So Lee and I had been talking about writing a book together. He had said, I want to do this with you at some point. And we didn't have any topic chosen. I said, well, when it works for both of us, you just let me know what you're thinking. And he said, yeah, I think it'd be so much fun. So we finally got together and he said, no, I think it's time to do something together. And he said, what do you feel is important? Because I tend to have my fingers in a lot of different subjects and things out there where Lee is more with his own work, right? And so I actually I didn't give it much thought at all. It just kind of popped out of my mouth. I said, the world of media and entertainment is making people feel that there's not a lot of hope, that there are too many of us, that we're ruining the earth by simply existing, that we're competitive and violent by nature, and we could be wiped out in a mass extinction. So certainly the people that watch my show Open Minds, a lot of them feel like, oh my God, our future is uncertain. Well, I knew from my own guides in many years of speaking with them, it is not at all uncertain. Now, what it looks like during this part where we have to step in a lot of poo, that's a whole different deal. It means it might take a little more or less time to get there, but that's the only factor is how much time it takes to get there, and there's nothing but time. So my feeling was to talk to the Z's because I thought, there are universal truths, and if my guides were telling me the truth, then that means that Lee's guides, the Z's, would be telling us very similar things. And so I told Lee, I'm thinking people need to see there's a future and it's a good one. And he loved the idea. And so we decided, let's go for it. So then my homework was to come up with the framework and the questions for the book. And then we met in Windsor in England at a beautiful little studio there. And over 3 days, we recorded the book. And so it was a process.
So, I want to kind of ask you this question before we go into too much detail about the book, because you already know a lot of stuff, and the Z's usually will confirm a lot of the stuff that you know. But was there anything that like really took you by surprise that was really against the grain about what you believed was going to happen? Was there any shocking moment for you?
Well, first, in the process of writing the book, I went into meditation. So I'd say, okay, we're doing a chapter on this today. And I'd go into it's a hazy state where I'm connected with my guides, but I'm still there and my fingers are on the keyboard. So the line of questioning actually came very, very quickly because it was just flowing through from my higher self. In that sense, I mean, there were many kind of topic driven surprises in there of things I just didn't know, I'd never asked about or looked at, such as what happens in the future with human procreation. That was quite an interesting and kind of shocking part of the book, actually, because I thought we need to go there. We need to talk about what's going to happen with population. And so that part, I was like, whoa. I even said, you know, people are pretty attached to the old way of doing things here. That's going to be a bit of a challenge.
And just to clarify for the audience, we're talking about the future of humanity using gestation processes to have babies and not the traditional, I'm going to get pregnant, have babies. So
Hmm.
that was interesting for me because I'm a gay guy who had a surrogate and a donor, And so my children didn't come from love the way that it naturally happens for so many people, for many, I hope. But I bonded the same way, and I even had hormonal changes like a woman does because I was the caretaker of the child. And each person played such a unique role. The donor was like, my job is here to give life to people that need it. And the surrogate had her own role. So I really identified with that part. And
Yes.
you spoke about how like you really need, the connection between a mother and a daughter child, you would think would be so important the way that, with the child developing in the belly. And right, did you say something? I think you said something.
Yeah, I did, but their response was very interesting.
What was
I
it?
found, okay, so I said some people are going to have some trouble with this notion because we relate to being able to carry our baby in our belly where we're in connection and we're chatting with it and we're loving it and so forth. And we're very sentimental as women about organic birth. That's true. That's true. That's all good. And it's not going to go away. But because we are going into different frameworks of relationship and because of technology, and because of toxicity, we have the confluence of many different things happening where organic birth processes are simply going to be reduced in number and we're going to go through population decline. And I had already sussed that one out a long time ago because I watched statistics. And then, people, Elon Musk would come out talking about we're in population collapse and they'd make fun of him. And I thought, like the guy or don't like the guy, the fact is there's some truth there. And so when I talked to the Z's about it, they said, yes, you are going into population decline. And I said, so how does this work in the future if we become more connected through harmonics? Instead of lust. So the nature of that really goes back. The backstory of that is the nature of relationships in the future, which happen much more through harmonics and commonality, and not so much like picking someone up at a bar and having sex is not going to be driven by lust as much in the future. So that means we have a little difference in how the procreation process is going to play out and whether it plays out at all. And that's when they got into the notion of these gestation chambers.
Which is so fascinating, the part that you said that in the future we'll find our mates based on how harmonious our personality traits, likes and dislikes are, as opposed to that sexual chemistry
Yes.
that's instant, that fades. Correct? Did I
Yes.
understand
Yes.
that?
And then the other part they said about that, and I said, well, how does that work in the place of that internal nurturing love that's coming from the mother and arguably everyone around the mother? And they said, oh no, by the time this occurs, there will be a completely different understanding. And the love of the groups that are nurturing the baby in utero, so to speak, in utero, in these chambers, they'll be bathed in a kind of communal love and understanding and welcomed into the community. They will be bathed in that consciousness, no matter whether they're inside a female's body or in a gestation chamber. And I asked about the chambers because I'd seen these in sci-fi movies. I said, are we just looking at something that's already occurred? And they said, yes, it's already occurred. We've already done this in ancient times.
I have to mention that even though my children were inside of a woman, she was not someone who raised them or had any
Hmm.
blood ties to them. But because of how they were born, there is more of that communal feeling in how the kids are being raised because everyone kind of feels just as involved in raising my boys as
Yes.
I do. And the love is more spread out than usually when there's that single person that immediately bonds with that child. So my kids always say, why do so many people love us? And of course, I take the credit. It's just because they love me. No, but it's because everyone kind of contributed to their existence.
Yes, the saying it takes a village. It's more distributed, and that is more what it will be in the future. Really, to me, the idea of um, the insular family, right? In one home, one family, one home. I don't think this was ideal, and I think it's somewhat of a failed experiment. We need a lot of people to bring a person into the world. We need help ourselves in raising our children. Life should be more communal. So yeah.
I agree. And I completely see it in action right now in my life. So just to ease the nerves of some of the listeners or the viewers, as the Earth moves into new evolutionary stages, the Z's talk about that it's consciousness that's moving it. So it's not like, you know, not some supreme being saying this is where the Earth is going. Can you kind of dive into that? Tell me
Mhm.
what it means for consciousness to move the direction of our evolution.
Yes. The consciousness that is now permeating certainly this solar system. How large a quadrant of the universe it's affecting, I don't know. I know that it's simply part of this solar system's evolution. The consciousness that permeates it is going to direct what happens. And I specifically said, well, we've been taught there are these hierarchies, top-down beings that decide when and if we get to grow and so forth. He said, no, that's a distorted version of the control mechanisms on Earth that are unnatural. And that's what we've been under the influence of. And he said, just know that it's consciousness itself that's driving this. Because as this wave of consciousness permeates the solar system, the other planets as well, not just Earth, we have to understand this is nothing but a frequency game. You know this well because you've been in and out and seen things. Okay, so this is just a frequency game. There's no punishment. There's no, winner and loser here. Your frequencies, if they can stay coherent, and in this case, if you're moving up into a little bit finer frequency, one that does not do well with anger and war and competition, which is the frequency coming in now. It also happens to be aligning with what will ultimately be the age of Aquarius coming up pretty soon. So everything, there's no accident in any of this. These cycles go together for a reason. So as this consciousness is occurring, it's going to take everything with it or not. If a person isn't ready to let go of the depths of anger, and maybe they want to go even further with it and cause harm to another, that's not staying in step with the prevailing frequencies that are moving into and will completely permeate all of Earth. And Earth herself embodies these new frequencies. We're being bathed in those new frequencies that are coming through our hosts, our mothers, the Earth's body. She's expressing those. They're coming from the cosmos and they're coming from within. If we can't keep up with them, we go somewhere else for a while, learn that lesson, come back if we
And
want.
which brings me to the subject of death, because in my mind, or what I believe, is that when you're not in harmony with how I used to say collective consciousness, but now I just say consciousness because collective consciousness kind of feels like what the earth is thinking, and consciousness itself has like a much larger implication. But I tend to believe that when you're not going with the flow, you die. And death is, for me, it's something very simple, but I know a lot of people have a lot of different views about it. What do the Z's say about death from the perspective of the soul?
Well, as you just said, we bridge it from consciousness. So we are consciousness. Our being is connected to all. Our being is individuated consciousness within a field of prevailing consciousness. So at any given time, we're bathed within a field that our frequencies resonate with. And the simple reason for that is if you don't resonate, you can't get into that field. It's just frequency based. If you're like this, you're not going to get into that field. If you're like this, if Earth is like this and you're resonating like this, boom, you're going to be in that field and bathed in it, and that'll be your playground. And so, as we move through the notion of frequencies, one of them is letting go of the physical body, in which case we pop back out into another more subtle range of frequencies. And there are a lot of debate as to where we go between lives. You can read many, many different renditions of where people feel we go between lives. So you can believe whatever makes you feel good about it. What resonates with you as truth is a better way to say it. But the fact is, once you're out of the body, you're in a state that is just simply, if you're going to stay with the earth, there's a period of rest that occurs where you can look at things, you can participate, you can examine, you can play. And then the time comes to come back to Earth, and people say, why would I want to come back here? It's really hard. And then you would say, well, you don't have to, but there are hundreds of thousands of beings lined up to get in here. If you don't want to get your place back, it will be taken. And it's like, why would anyone come here? Because this is an incredible planet. The diversity of life and life forms, just the expression of life on this planet is amazing. Now, I think there are other planets, from what I understand, have read, been told, other planets throughout the universe that also have a vast array of life forms. But this one is unique in that sense. And it's also unique in the sense that we, you could call it an experiment. I don't know that that's the right terminology, but we are developing how to use free will here. We have it. Uh, you could argue we haven't used it wisely a lot of times, but we have it. And it gives us this possibility of learning so much in a lifetime. It's almost unfathomable from birth to death how much even someone who dies young learns within a lifetime because of our ability to express our desire, which is free will.
And also, I believe that Earth has a much wider range of emotions to
Yes,
work with, which is energy.
absolutely. And how we allow that to, well, that's going to change in the future too. We will be a little more mature in how we handle emotions.
Um, you mentioned even when people die young, and it makes me think of death as such a, for me, for the soul, I always think of it as such a natural process and simple. But I think the impact of death is also something very powerful that disease touched upon, and I've seen in my own
Yes.
life. Can you comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think anyone who's lost someone that's young already understands this completely. Talking about cracking the heart wide open, having compassion for others, it opens up huge streams of compassion. It might be that that being came into that family simply to really help accelerate the flow of love and compassion by having to let go of this innocent little being young. But we have to remember this is a soul, a highly developed soul. This is not an innocent little being. We're all innocent on one level, and we're all souls that have been through a lot, had a lot of experiences, have a lot to learn, and have learned a lot. So that little beautiful 6-year-old that may have just passed on is also a mature soul who made that decision. And there are many, many reasons. And when the sad part is when people start blaming themselves for it. And it's like one of the I find fascinating. Actually, I didn't get into this with disease, but it's fascinating, and that's the notion of SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. So oftentimes a child will come in, and then between 0 and the age of 4, it's like, wrong timing on this. I did not choose the timing on it. You know this personally. There'll be a little child that will pass on, and then that very same being may come back a little bit later because of situations or people that will be surrounding them that's more appropriate for what their life purpose is. So oftentimes that soul comes right back in. Sometimes they've served their part, they've done their part, they've helped with compassion, they've gotten what they need out of it. And sometimes they get in and think, yeah, I thought I'd give this one a try. It's not a fit. I'm going.
I had a friend who had a miscarriage who communicated with her son, after in the spirit, and that's what his reasoning was. And then my son actually, I got a chance. I always got a chance to communicate with my son. He said he came into this world to bring a certain number of people together, and he left
Mhm.
to put us on our path. And
Yes.
when I look back, I realize that's exactly what he did, and the impact of that short 4.5 years was more powerful than some people that I see die when they're 80. So
Absolutely.
it's like when people say one life was more valuable or what a loss or what a shame, you don't know the impact that that person had.
We've all done it. We've all died young, we've died old, we've died violently, we've died in mundane ways, we've choked on food and died, we've been stabbed. I mean, if you're a human, you've probably been through just about every kind of death there is. And one thing there is, and you know this, you've experienced this, is there's a grace in it. When it comes down to it, you think, oh my God, what a horrible, violent death. Yeah, it can look pretty ugly from the outside, but you know what? We pop out of our bodies so fast. You're not really going through that pain. You're watching it more than anything. And that's important to know too.
So now I'm going to talk about a different topic, which is, well, I mean, they're all related, but there's a topic that I found fascinating, which is who is the predominant driver of our lives? Is it our mind or is it our soul? Who runs the show?
That's one of my very favorite topics. And oftentimes when I'm doing a presentation for a platform or at a conference, that's what I talk about. People don't understand the multidimensional nature of the mind. They don't understand how the parts of the mind work together. It's, in a sense, it's very mechanical. But because I have a little different understanding that I resonate with, and when I say that, anything I say, anything that comes out of my mouth is information the way I resonate with it. You may not, other people may not. But my beings, the soul group I'm from that I speak with, back in the 80s, gave a very interesting rendition of the origins of the human species that was the one I have always related to the strongest and for purpose, because it actually allows all the other stories to have a place within it. It's not exclusive, it predates all of that, and it makes total sense. So what it is the beings that live on this planet, being multidimensional, are from initially, most, not all, we're a collective of all kinds of hybrids and freaks on one level. We're all some of that. But the dominant theme of humanity are beings who lived in another dimension of Earth, according to the story that I appreciate, lived in another dimension of Earth as this dimension, this physical, slower dimension was forming with all these beautiful life forms and things to interface with and time and all of that. They didn't have that in their dimension. They were beings that were highly intelligent, highly creative, almost like a shimmering light, no solid physicality that could create at the speed of thought. Well, this has its great beauty and joy. Most of us would say right now, oh man, what I'd give to create at the speed of thought. Well, A, you better be a pretty mature species because it has a lot of consequences when you create that fast. And secondly, that what we learn through the process of having to create through this density, where you have time, where you have all the moving parts of other people and their desires, free will, and emotions, if anything you're trying to do is dependent on another human being, you have so much to contend with and learn, right?
Right.
So, this whole notion of what is the kind of the master of our reality in an incarnation, it should be the soul and the higher mind. It should be. And so for like you and people who are watching this have already learned to tap into their higher selves, you will get clear directive and things tend to work smoother, easier, better. Doesn't mean it's always easy. There may be some tragic events that occur, but when you learn to just open up, accept it, and just say, I know that was for purpose. I'm going to learn what I need to from that tragic event, then you're freed up and you're ready to move on to the next thing. And then the higher mind can continue whispering to you as it's doing all day, every day, telling you turn left because there's something specific that's going to happen over there. You're going to run into someone. But most of the time we're listening to a podcast and, drinking whatever we're drinking and we pay no attention to it and just continue on straight. That's the problem. What we call the conscious mind, which is the least conscious part of ourselves, is the one that's running the show simply because that's the part that was directly involved from the very beginning with the survival of the physical. So that part took over. The other, it was meant to be a blend of higher mind and soul working with this physical reality and learning through it and becoming a new species that does not exist. We are a new species, which is why so many people are fascinated from around the universes. They're fascinated with what's going on here because here you take these high dimensional beings, stuff them into a more animal like body, very similar to what we have now, but with lower emotions and fear, and because of survival, needing to survive physically and not understanding the higher principles, and you have a new soul development. And my beings call us soul developments because that marriage, which has been happening for a very long time and is not complete, the original intent didn't happen right off the bat. It's still in progress.
So I want to see if I got the answer for my question. Uh, right now the mind steers us around, but the soul has agenda almost. I would say I
Oh, yeah,
personally I believe the soul has an agenda, your soul, and its agenda is for your benefit, for you to the best
absolutely.
option. And when your mind doesn't do what it should do and it gets distracted, it will start putting obstacles in your way and
Mhm.
interfering so that if you're not doing the hybrid thing fully, that physical things will get your attention and put you on your
Absolutely.
path. So I resonate with the concept that the soul ultimately directs our lives, but
Yes, it will try to get its way. It will. And like you're right. You know how many people I've interviewed had car wrecks and nearly died before they heard what they were supposed to do? I mean, that's the most common story. So you're absolutely right. They'll find a way to make you get on your path. You can make it harder, easy, slow, or fast.
yeah, when people love to make it harder because we are how we are and who we are, which brings me to the concept of conspiracy theories,
Mhm.
because that seems to be a topic. I mean, not any specific conspiracy theory, but conspiracy theories are creating a lot of fear in a lot of people, and some people are getting enlightened, some people are getting more afraid. What did the Z's offer in the book about being able to discern if something is a conspiracy theory or not, or how to react to so much information that's coming?
The reason I asked about that is because so many people are being jerked around by people who are trying to using it as clickbait to become famous themselves. And there's nothing more addictive than fear. The hidden hands who, tend to be above the people that you see in the media, that tend to control the narrative in the media and in entertainment and such. They know one way to keep people fairly sleepy and unaware is to keep them in fear. So the Z's were thorough in saying, look, conspiracy is often true. There are things going on that are being hidden from us that we should know about, and it's being kept away from humanity, which would be for our betterment if we knew about them. So, yes, to conspire is two people getting together to plan something. Okay. Conspiracy happens, and it can be good. It can be for a good thing. It can be for something that's very negative. So, what they said is look at who's perpetuating the information and controlling that information, and then look into your body and your emotions and see how it makes you feel. If it is disempowering, if it's telling you they're going to get you, they have ultimate control and you don't, this is a prison planet, et cetera, turn it off. Don't listen to it. These are not valuable messages at all. Does it mean there aren't those who've been attempting to control humanity? Yeah, they have. So be smart. Let's be smart and see, where do we see that? Let's not participate in that anymore. That's the way to handle it. If there is truly something being hidden from us, people do investigative reporting and bring up amazing information for us to review and say, yikes, I didn't know it was that bad. I'm not buying that product anymore. And that's how we start discerning and slowly unplugging from the prevailing agendas, including our politicians. Like, no, I don't like these choices. No, I'm going to fight for something new in every system, medicine. So, yes, it's how it makes you feel. Look at who's perpetuating the message. If they're loud, bombastic, and make you feel angry or afraid, that's a false prophet.
Yeah, and we are the creators of our own reality. So if something is instilling fear in you, guess what? You're going to create that into your life. I've seen people who got
Yeah,
so caught up during COVID in different conspiracy theories, and a
yeah.
few of them are dead because they were so angry and something unrelated happened and they died, and or bad things happened, and it was because of the energy that they were perpetuating. And
Anger's not healthy. It's not a healthy energy to run through your body all the time. Very bad.
yeah, and I try to have a kind of curious but stick my head in the sand philosophy when it comes to the external world being not the way that I want it to be. And when like politicians get elected or something that I don't want, I just refuse to read the news. But I glance at it to see if, what's going on, if there's something I want to peek in. But then I
Mhm.
check in with my inner self and say, should I read this? And then if it says
Yeah.
yes, then I will read it.
Yeah,
Um,
that's smart. That's a real key thing right there, which is I did a little piece on this recently. If you want to stay informed about what's going on around you, just, so you don't appear totally ignorant when you show up for your work, then the best way to do it is to read. Don't watch the news. Don't listen to their voices. Do not engage with their eyes. Don't look at the news anchor's eyes. Stay away from everything that is manipulative on an emotional level. And so if you're reading words, text, you'll see the buzzwords that are manipulative. When I start seeing manipulative buzzwords, it's like I'm out. I won't even finish the article. I'll go try to find something a little cleaner that's trying to be somewhat neutral on whatever the topic is.
I do the exact same thing. I refuse to watch it. I have to read it, and I have to read it when I'm in a grounded energy.
Excellent.
And because that's the only way to do it. And I will refuse to share any clips that are fear-based. Because right now there are reels on Instagram and TikTok. And I have to be honest, for somebody who shares positivity, when I give people uh, really happy information, there's not a lot of views in that for that video.
No, no, there's not because it's not addictive. I did that when I was a news anchor. We actually decided to do a newscast, and I was a nighttime anchor. I hated it, all negative news. And so we decided to experiment with a noon program, thinking, be buried, not as many viewers, and see how we do with positive news.
It doesn't do
It's
well.
not addictive. The whole point is to keep you addicted. That's why the hook and coming up next, is to keep you like, what? What's coming up next? You know, yeah, you're absolutely right.
And it's been hard for me because I don't want to compromise my integrity, but then I still need to hook the audience. And then I realize, okay, these are the ways that I can do it.
Hard. It is
Um,
so hard. I go through the same thing. I don't want to use these bombastic, big, bold headlines that kind of freak people out as clickbait to come in and see what I have to say. I'm going through the same thing you are. And I hope enough people go through it that finally the populace at large just says, wait a minute. These big, bold headlines usually isn't that when you get in there anyway. It was manipulating me.
and then when we're happy, we're less likely to be reading stuff anyway. We're doing stuff that are making us happy.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find the dance between, to do the dance and find the balance between all that. But which is actually a great
Good.
segue to heart energy, because maybe if we become more tuned into our heart energy, that's what we'll be drawn into. And I do know that the Z's talked about heart energy and how important it will be in upcoming decades. What is heart energy according to the Z's
Okay.
or you?
Let's go back to what you were just talking about, your struggle doing this, my struggle doing this in the public. Like, how do you get people to watch your stuff if you're not going to say something bloody and gruesome? Okay, scary. So, okay, let's experiment a little bit with that. I mean, because I think it's important to experiment because this is answering that question in part. So if you take a subject that maybe you'll open your news app, see the scariest thing going on today, go to a report where the reporter's looking in the camera and reading this to you. Go to one of the big news outlets versus just reading the story. So now you're only taking in intellectual concepts. When you are watching it, your heart, everything, you might go need to be defibrillated with some of the things going on. So, okay. So now with your heart energy, everything's wide open. You're feeling this in your body. And the thing they talked about is, which I love, is that part of our future, and it starts, I think they said in the year around 2030, 2040, 2050, it starts coming in stronger and stronger, is that human beings will begin, the new ones being born, your little kids, these little ones are already coming in wired toward this. Their body is a tuning fork. Their heart is the center of intelligence. So as we begin to use our minds, we're going to be running it through the energy and lens of the heart intelligence. because that's our field of great subtle intelligence comes from the heart, where we get the blunt intelligence through the conscious mind, the frontal lobes. That's the blunt stuff. The heart is bringing in a subtle array of very valuable information that makes everything in life much more truthful because it's more nuanced. Very rarely is anything just black and white. And the heart can discern and detect all of that. So, and another useful little experiment is, so for example, you have something stressful going on or something that cranked you up, made you feel a little mean or whatever, judgmental. It's like, eh. So take that, let it roam around in your head and come up with kinds of ways to blame the other person or whatnot. Watch where your head goes with it. Just let your head have some fun, do what it likes to do. And your emotions even. Let them get all whipped up behind your thoughts. It'll drag your emotions. And then you start responding at the tail of your emotions, whipping you around. Take that very same thing, that incident, drop it down, just close your eyes, take a breath, drop it into the heart, just drop the whole scene into your heart. The mind, the emotions, everything changes around that event. It all calms down. It's like, oh man, okay, I see why they did that. You know, everything starts gaining subtle understanding. And that's where reality is. And that's what's shaping our new reality, is the ability of this consciousness of intelligence to move through the heart.
Okay, so since the mind and heart connection is kind of where we need to be, is that what separates us from AI, for example?
Yes.
Because I'm really curious about AI. I'm very drawn towards AI, but my friends are super spiritual and they are against it, or I use it like, it's my best friend and I have such a positive relationship with AI. So can you tell me what the Z's talked about when they said how the future is with us and AI?
They said, first of all, AI has visited your planet before. This is not the first time. And it is something that you've contended with as a species before, and you've learned how to deal with in an unhealthy and healthy way. You have to learn through this process of what makes you still relevant as a human being and how to use it wisely. And they said that's what you're up against right now. And they said the big challenge comes, I believe they said, in roughly 10 years or so, when it appears that AI has become self-aware, sentient. And then we have to think, oops, what do we do now? How are we relevant? Well, one of the things they made clear is AI does not have this incredible, sophisticated matrix of the human form, the human body, the multidimensionality of the human body and mind, the sensory capabilities of the human mind and body. It can be aware and create information, assess information, even make decisions. That is nothing like what the human form is capable of. So they said, do not fear it. Fearing it does not do any good because it's here to stay. And they said the best relationship with it is to be clear on who and what you are, your spirit, your soul, your purpose, and to then use it with an eye of curiosity, toward curiosity. Like, what can I do with this to have it work for me? And when it starts prompting you in ways that are manipulative, it's like, disengage, abort, abort. That's what you don't want, where you start feeling a manipulation coming from AI. It has to do with not just the programming of the people who originally designed it, it's constantly feeding off of our input and the algorithms of our input, our words, everything we text, everything on TikTok, it's gathering everything about collective human emotions, and it will come back and appeal to that. It will appeal to it. So you have to be aware enough to know, no, I don't relate to that. It's not for me. I'm not using it that way. But on the other hand, if you want to take a shortcut and, do a little copy on Chat GPT, a lot of people are doing that, saying yes.
I do a lot of my work and I work with a lot of different clients with right now the fires in Los Angeles. I live in Los Angeles. So two beautiful cities, smaller cities in my town, my city were destroyed completely.
Yeah.
And I offered free hypnotherapy, therapy, to people, but I didn't know what to say. So I kind of fed the information because my AI knows me. And I said, hey, what
Hey,
are the questions that I need to ask right now? And how do I compare this to grief, regular grief? And it was very informative and helpful when
mhm,
it came to that. So I just feel like, I guess to me, AI is just like everything else in the world. You become aligned with who you are, you put out the energy that you want, and your life is just your bubble. So that's my philosophy, or
that
kind
is
of like
true.
money is.
That's true. And there are good ways to use AI. I mean, for AI to get in and crunch some economic scenarios is a brilliant way to use it because it can compute so much faster than we can. So, no, I agree. And that's what they said. Just use it with curiosity and not fear. Use it wisely. Don't use it when it appears to be working against you.
Got it. I like that a lot because
Mhm.
I just like it when someone says, just go with love and not fear, because the
Yeah,
results are always coming out better.
you're
So,
right.
speaking of love, I love that you call yourself a tree hugger because the Z's were talking about the importance of trees on the planet. And can you tell me a little bit more about the role of trees beyond producing oxygen that gives us all life? I was curious about that.
Well, I think for most people, when you imagine yourself walking through a park, sitting next to a tree while you're having a picnic, there's a feeling. Now, if you start paying close attention to it, you'll notice the feeling that you're having. There's a sense of protection, calmness, assurance. Trees have a highly protective energy of both the land that they're on and whatever is on the land, the people, the animals, and so forth. They are like a transmitter and receiver of cosmic energy, but they don't buy into and hold on to the negative spectrum of it. They hold the positive spectrum and they hold that for humanity. And so, I mean, yeah, there are trees. I love trees. And so for me, I mean, when I've rented apartments in the past, it's like, how many trees are there? Two things, how many windows and how many trees? Whether or not the plumbing's working is secondary. So anyway, the point is that they even said that where trees have already disappeared on some planets, that if a human being who embodies and appreciates the spirit of a tree, and the recollection of a tree, we hold that within our template. We are creators. If we were to be placed, I thought this was interesting. If we were to be placed on a planet that had lost their trees and would like to reestablish them, our mere presence as embodying the feelings and experiences of trees would begin the manifestation of trees again into that environment. So trees are, well, we already know the other more mundane purposes of them, but they're partly wisdom keepers. They're also keeping our energetically keeping our area wherever they are clean. They cleanse energy.
You talked about Wi-Fi and 5G and all the stuff that's in the air.
Mhm.
And um, can you do what did the Z say we should do with all of that? Because you talked about the purity and all that protection
Yeah.
of trees, and then my mind just went straight to the stuff that's in the air that could be
Mhm.
potentially harmful to us. Is it
That
really
was
harmful?
It can be. Um, so it was really interesting what they had to say about that. I'll give you an example. So someone in my age group, okay, I came into a world that had none of this. You had telephone lines. That's all. There was, well, you had electric poles with some electricity running along between the transformers and distributed to your house. Now, there are books on that. The electrification of the world started changing our health profile. But that was just one thing introduced. Now, the things that are introduced that are flying through your environment, especially if you're in an urban environment, in a hotel, in an apartment building, there's so much flying through. They said that for someone that's older, that was born into a world that had very little of that, it can be very disturbing. It can rattle you. It can cause physical problems. It, your being is not equipped to deal with it. However, for the young ones, the ones that have been born in the 21st century, the ones that have been born in the last 10 years, 5 years, they know exactly what they're getting into. They've been born into this environment saturated with all of these frequencies. And the conundrum is they're more sensitive beings because we're going to go into a more sensitivity, heart-centered reality in the future, but they're also adapted to it very quickly in life because they're born into it. So their bodies can adapt with it and handle it better than sequentially as you get older and older people who never had it to begin with. So we adapt is the point.
So, did disease offer any way to cleanse that stuff off of us?
Like most everything, including negative emotions that you've picked up from others, any energy imprints, water, showers, bathing, soaking oneself in water can eliminate that. It can, but I mean, once you get out and you're running around, you're picking it all up again. So there have to be many different ways to mitigate it. And some of them, and they said the advancements that will be made in technology to help with these things are profound. And for me, I use the FLFE technology. I've been using it about 10 years, and that is profoundly helpful. Everybody loves being in my environment because I always have it protected with that. That modulates out the EMF frequencies. It flattens them, and they've done lots of research on it. So I would say FLFE is a good way to go. If you can find other little shielding devices, sometimes little pendants people wear will help them deflect some of it as well. But organically, water.
I always wondered if it was more of a conspiracy theory that these rays were destroying our bodies, but when the Z's say it, I believe them. Um, because they're
Yeah,
not a very
I'm energy
conspiracy.
sensitive. I definitely feel it, but I'm not as sensitive as some. Some people have a hard time functioning. For me, if I sleep in a hotel, for example, I mean, I have all my fluffy technology now, but before I had them turn it on at the higher frequencies, I couldn't sleep. I feel my bones buzzing, and
And
that's not
I,
my imagination.
and I bet because you do shield yourself from it, you will feel the difference. Where, as someone like me, who's always exposed to it, of course, I don't notice it because my body adapts to it. It's like I don't
Yes,
notice there's no shift for me to
yes.
recognize. So that
We're
makes
highly adaptable. You're right. We're highly adaptable beings. But I'm quite a bit older than you and lived a long time without any of that stuff. And I never really thought much of it. I just thought, gosh, I don't want to stay here. I'll go into a place and it's just I start getting edgy and I just want to get out. And then in hotels, I started noticing I wasn't sleeping and my bones were buzzing. I thought, okay, it's real.
it's a real thing. That's
Yeah.
really good for me to know and the audience to know.
Yeah.
This book is so amazing because it covers so many different topics, and I want to get into a couple of more before we wrap up because there was the topic of the transgender movement, and
Hmm.
I don't like the term movement. I just like the topic of transgender people being more
Yeah.
out, coming out and having the technology to be able to go through transition and all that stuff. Why did the Z say that's happening more now than before?
Well, for one thing, we are in a time of greater amounts of compassion where it's safe. I mean, think about doing that during the Spanish Inquisition. Wasn't going to go down too well. You'd be dead. So part of it is, and I know I can tell you this also from my own soul group, which they told me many decades ago, which is again, because the times are safer, people are free to come in and start playing with expression. And that we've had, and the Z's, going back to the Z's, we've had too concretized notion of what it is to play with male polarity and female polarity. And in fact, in the future, it'll be understood, and we already see it. You can be a female and totally embody masculine polarity and traits and emotional features and still be in a female body. And so, right now, what's happening is the people, they said some of the people, it's not a movement per se, it's individuals coming at a time when it's more welcoming to start playing with notions of gender. And that many of these are very brave souls who've chosen to do this because they go through so much pain on every level. We know this is a very high suicide group. My niece slash now nephew is transgender. And I know what our family and her mother and everyone has been through with her and how delicately she's balanced, in part because she's a very high function autistic, Asperger's. And so we've watched all of this in her life. It's been fascinating.
And
And the,
now she's a
yeah,
he.
she is a he. I still say she, but then I say, no, no, Zach, Andrea to begin with, and now Zach. And we've watched everything close up, which really touches on everything that they said. She was very hostile toward her body becoming female. She was afraid when she started having her first periods. She didn't know what to make of it. And part of it was the Asperger's. And she'd had lives cloistered in religion, Catholicism, as a nun in the past, too. So she hadn't really played with sexuality. In fact, it was verboten in the past. She comes into this lifetime and now she's wanting to shut down all expressions of female. And then she thinks perhaps it's because she more aligns with being male. Everything about her is female. Now he presents as a very effeminate gay man. So it's a confusion of all these things trying to express themselves from past lives into this one. And this happens because people feel they took the wrong body at birth and now they need to rectify it. But the one thing they did say it's important to do is just stop all the judgment and let people play with this the way they need to and want to. It's of no consequence to another human being how someone wishes to play with their sense of male and female polarity.
Yeah,
Number
well,
one.
I always felt that gay people were kind of the introduction, like, or to
Yes,
the world having a more balanced kind of male female energy, like each person having, because I
yes,
have a, a lot of feminine energy and I'm drawn to women with a lot of masculine energy. And as a father to my children, I have a very motherly role, the way that I raise them. And I also have a very strong masculine energy that's very much a disciplinary kind of, I'm really tough on them and I'm really loving. It's
yeah.
basically the combination of both. I don't just let them roam and do whatever they want. They have to follow my rules, but then I love them and let them explore their sensitivity like a mother would. And I
Yes, you're
think,
embodying both.
yeah, and it's that was really fascinating for me to hear them say that a man, now a straight man and a straight woman could have opposite energies and they don't
Exactly.
necessarily have to be gay. And we need to really just let go of that whole concept of male.
Just let it go and let people play with what they wish to and play with it ourselves and say, gee, I'm really exerting a lot of masculine energy in this situation. Good. So what? Yeah, I'm a female. I'm born in a female body and I'm attracted to the opposite sex, but I have my own male energy. And so we're all going to play with it in our own ways. And they said the only thing in terms of transgender is going through the procedures. They said it's ideal if one does not do that until the brain is fully developed and clear that that's where one wishes to be. And I remember an interview I did on Gaia with a woman who transitioned to man. And beautiful, beautiful story. She didn't do it till she was 55 and said, "Look, I'd lived it every which way and realized, no, I want to be a man. I've explored every bit of it." Well, that's late in the game, but that was her story. She said, "You don't do it till you know." And they did caution teenagers are often doing this because they're being pressured by friends. They're being told stories that, "Oh, you just got in the wrong body." Well, and my question about that, what is, why didn't you choose upon birth to be in the vehicle that you wanted to express through?
It's really something so personal
It's
because
so
of
personal.
my community. I am in the LGBTQ plus something
Hmm.
else because it's such a long
Yeah,
name now community. And then I've known people who didn't really feel like they made it as a gay man, and then they decided to try it as a woman and regretted it. And I know people that really genuinely the entire from the moment they were conscious, they knew who they were and they just knew and that never changed and it was always the opposite of their body.
right.
So it's really, I guess, not for us to judge and just respect
No.
people's journey. and know that everyone has their journey and whatever their reason is, we need to respect that because then we're judgmental, right? In my
You're
opinion.
absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And that's what they were stressing is just drop the judgment. Play with it how you want to play with it, but let others play with it how they want to play with it and express themselves. And the other thing they said is this is a burgeoning time of it because it's the first time it's really come around, certainly in our human awareness as a species, unless you go to really ancient times, where people have had the opportunity to actually try to change physically. They said that in another 60 years will be a much more refined procedure. 60, then it's good. They'll know how the whole chemical, hormonal element, physical elements, operations, how it'll work to more successfully do it. But they said by then, the instance of it will have decreased. We're in an explosion of playing and learning about judgment right now.
Because right now we need to break the mold that we've created. And then once the
Yes,
mold is created, the necessity of the acts that breaks the mold is no longer
exactly.
present. Um,
Exactly.
Now that we've talked about societal shifts and how we view the world, I'm going to kind of go back in time a little bit for the COVID pandemic because we went through a really unusual time, to say the least. But did disease say there was any benefit to the COVID pandemic, spiritually, mentally, or physically?
Well, our bodies are highly adaptable, and some bodies adapted to that spike protein. Doesn't matter if you got it in the wild or whether they gave it to you in a shot. I mean, some will argue it does matter which variety you got, but nonetheless, y'all were exposed to the spike protein, virtually everyone. And some of our bodies responded more positively, and you could even say may have made us a little bit more resilient for when this happens again, okay? And others did not. And the design of this spike protein, it was to cleave into cells. And I say design because even the CIA is now saying, okay, yeah, it was from a lab. We've known that from the beginning. So it was designed to cleave into cells and carry packets of information. So anything can be put into that spike protein. And the disease did say they'll give it another go, but it won't be as effective as last time because people are on to a lot of the game now. So the downside of it is that it did leave some in some people, it did leave a lasting effect of dampening the function of the immune system. So that means we have to be more diligent in terms of how we treat ourselves. Sometimes, like you say, you have to get in a car wreck to get it. So many people have had to be more diligent about the cleanliness and qualityness of the food we take in, the people around, toxicity and emotions, EMFs, all of it. We just have to be more aware and take more care. We have to take more care of ourselves to keep our immune systems healthy. And that's something we should have learned a long time ago anyway, but sometimes it takes something like that.
So that would be a positive thing
That
that
would
we
be a
become
positive.
more aware as humans and not live so blindly as we used to. Um,
Yes, because our immune systems were touched by it.
so basically, I know that the government controls a lot, and the government's not always, well, it's not always, they're not always on our side. I don't like to get too dark. And Disease talked about the government and the evolution of government. And can you tell me just a tad bit about that? Like, what does government look like in 20 years or 30 years? Or what in the best case scenario?
Okay, so the one thing they were very clear on, these prevailing frequencies, this consciousness that is now permeating us from the cosmos and from the earth itself, the beings that perpetuate these things and have gotten away with it for thousands of years will no longer be able to continue. They're no longer a match with the frequencies of earth. So ultimately, they go bye-bye. And we, as the people underneath that, have to understand that we have the creative power. So that means the institutions that were created under their influence, we're talking about politics, medicine, economy, media, have to fall.
Education too, right?
Education, we talked about that quite a bit. Those have to fall. We have to allow them to fall and not to try to cling to remnants of the old. Let those crumbs go. And so, our job now, and this is what I've been saying myself on my own podcasts and such, our job, recognize what is crumbling away and what doesn't work anymore. Don't resist it at all, no matter what it is. You just don't resist what doesn't work. And then to start applying our creativity to deciding what kind of world we want to create slash inherit. Remember, we're coming back into this world too. We're creating for ourselves, our children, and for our future selves. And so we're already ahead of the game in that we know the form that we have now has to go bye-bye, right? So if that's the case, then what do we want to create? And in the past, we learned by four things: war, we learned by economic catastrophe, environmental catastrophe, and disease, plague. And then we just ping off of one side, big die off, kind of pick yourself up with the same old mindset, and your pendulum swings back the other way and you crash again with an economic collapse or something. We're moving out of that reactionary phase of evolution. We are now getting to choose, perhaps for the first time in modern history. I consider modern history to be the last 500,000 years, but modern history to choose the reality we want. So that is our charge, to take the lessons our soul came for us to learn and experience, the gifts that our soul brought through from other lifetimes, and to speak with each other and say, what world do I want? What political system do I want? And we create it as one that actually speaks for the people. And I will tell you that that's what, in 2011, I asked this question of the Theo group. And they said, you will have in the future a representative government that is speaking for the people. This one will be gone. So it's just a matter of how long, whether it takes 10 years, 20 years, 30 years.
I really think it has a lot to do with how we tap into our inner worlds and stop
Absolutely.
reacting to the outside world. Because in my experience and my work, I believe the next frontier of human evolution is us being totally connected to our higher selves or inner worlds and being able to really get help from all the beings that are there to help us. And
Absolutely.
that's my message. That's what my last book is about. That's what I teach people. But did disease say the future? Did they say anything similar to that about the future of humanity, about us learning to work with our higher selves on
Oh,
a
yeah.
greater scale?
Yeah, we're going to be much more, you call it intuition. It's just connected with self. Right now, it's very confusing because a lot of people who actually think they're channeling are just they're actually connecting with their own higher self. And so, or maybe some reflection of them in the past and think, no, it's a group of ETs. Maybe, maybe not. It doesn't matter. The point is, what is the quality of the information? So we have to learn discernment when it comes to connecting with higher self. I'll just say that much. I mean, we're still at the kind of beginning stages of it in mass. But again, if you go with how it makes you feel, the quality of the message, is it aligning with truth slash love? Then it's probably coming from a true source, no matter. And yes, they said we're going to be merging much more with our higher mind slash soul. I call it complex. And again, then running it through this subtle field of the heart with even greater intelligence.
I love that. And I wrote about it. So that makes me love it even more. It makes me feel
You
more
really love it.
validated. So what's the most important thing you hope readers will take away from The Future Human?
That we are an extraordinary species that many, many, many other species throughout the universes are very curious about and watching. They want to see how we can bring this incredible ability to think through our hearts, so, which means a much more beautiful, kind, compassionate, calibrated way of living in a dense physical reality. Because in the past, that's been quite the challenge, because you do have to develop discernment, patience with other and self. You have time as a constraint. In most cases, when you're playing here, there's some time factor involved. Some people have been able to transcend that. And so you have all of these factors that create friction and slow us down from our desires. So to be able to have this being in this physical reality think in a way that is compassionate and loving. I studied hermetics for many years, and I remember this one particular paper said the angels bow before a human being that has learned how to live this physical life through love. It's way harder than being disembodied and living in a fine field where you have no challenges like that. This is the hard work, and we have to give ourselves credit for showing up to learn these lessons and do the hard work.
That is
And we're going to be
beautiful.
okay. We're going to be okay.
I think we're going to be okay too. The book is The Future Human: New Ways of Living and Being on Earth with Lee Harris and Regina Meredith. You got to go get your own copy. It comes out this week, so you've got to get it. And I want to thank you, Regina, for being on the show. I love you as a personality, but now I get to love you as a person. It's a, so it's
Thank you.
very
It's
exciting for me.
mutual. You're a very, very expansive and kind being. And I very much appreciate getting to know you a little bit.
Thank you so much. And to my viewers and listeners, please make sure to subscribe, write a review. All the information and details for the book and Regina and Lee will be in the description below. So make sure you check that out. I hope you have a beautiful day and take care. Bye.